خيجينا بلالي كوجوا قشاتنا لي ديما صبرون شش عليه على بمن بلالي ايش خيجينا بلالي كوجوا قشاتنا لي ديما صبرون شش عليه على بمن بلالي هي شقياته الله يبود خبي ما ضيالي هي شقياته الله يبود خبي ما ضيالي باينا 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 حبرت ويطلنا طيلنا طيلنا باينا واي باينا واي باينا حبرت ويطلنا طيلنا وطلنا ورده بكوسوت يا ورابه بالخمالة زرقت الشمشات مياه مخصصة نص مقالة ورده بكوسوت يا ورابه بالخمالة زرقت الشمشات مياه مخصصة نص مقالة وجوان قابس برها رؤوش برد قليلة هنا آوين ديلة وعج خالي معطيلة باينا 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 حبرت ويطلنا طيلنا طيلنا باينا واي باينا واي باينا حبرت ويطلنا طيلنا وطلنا جبرتها سرت له ما بيون طلصت له ورشت لك ليت له كل خيا برقد له ما جبرتها سرت له ما بيون طلصت له ورشت لك ليت له كل خيا برقد له يا براتت متوات له بخوبه مني بنت له يا براتت متوات له بخوبه مني بنت له باينا 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 حبرتها ويطلنا طيلنا طيلنا باينا واي باينا واي باينا حبرتها ويطلنا طيلنا وطلنا
Kia ora everybody, you are listening to Voice of Aroha on frequency 106.1 FM from Wellington, New Zealand. The show is sponsored by Host International New Zealand and is broadcasting on Wellington Access Radio. Joining me today is Beth and Louise, and we have our guest Guled Meyer. Guled, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you guys for having me. It's such a blessing to be here. I've been listening and watching all the great things that you guys have been doing, and I've been championing it from afar. So it's a blessing to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We're really looking forward to this interview. Would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Guled. I guess I am a man of many hats. I am, by profession, I'm a policy advisor, but I'm probably well more known in terms of what I do outside of my work and in my spare time. So I'm a community advocate. I am the co-founder of Third Culture Minds, which is a non-profit organization dedicated towards advancing positive mental health and well-being outcomes for young Kiwis of refugee and migrant background. I'm involved in a lot of advocacy work. I often speak on issues of importance to refugees, ethnic communities, Muslims, in the media, but also I have my own series that I've just launched, Third Culture Minds, which is looks at basically shedding a bit more of a light on the mental health experiences of refugees and migrant youth, and the impact of racism and discrimination that has on just generally their well-being and our ability to effectively contribute to society.
Yeah, kia ora, Guled. Kia ora, Guled, and it's a pleasure to have you in our radio show. Could you tell us about your memories when you got to New Zealand? What could you remember back then?
That's a really interesting question. So I was young. When I came to New Zealand, I was about 6 years old. My family left the Somali civil war in the early 90s. And we spent some time briefly at a Kenyan refugee camp before settling in the city Nairobi. And we were fortunate enough, obviously, only 1% of the world's refugee population are ever offered third country resettlement, and New Zealand being one of them. So I was really lucky in terms of being provided an opportunity to resettle here with my family back then. In terms of my earliest memories, honestly, I look back at it and I just think for me, and I've said this a number of times, like coming to New Zealand is really when I became cognizant of my own refugee background, if that makes sense. I think I had a very innocent upbringing. I really didn't know much about what was going on or what was happening around me. Again, that's probably due to the fact that I was young, we didn't have much, but from the scheme of things, it was all that I needed, loving parents, loving family, and so forth. So I was really lucky and fortunate in that regard. And I remember coming here, one of my earliest memories was just seeing a lot of white faces. I think that was something that was quite like, wow, okay, where are we? And I remember it being like, oh, my family being like, we're going to New Zealand. And, at the time we didn't speak much English, but we knew what the word new meant. We knew that it was something new. So I guess we assumed it was a new country. When we first had heard of it, they told us it was part of Australia. We really didn't know what to make of it. But yeah, I remember my earliest memories in terms of that drive down from Auckland to Hamilton, where my family resettled. Just seeing the beautiful landscape of New Zealand. You definitely, like, I knew I was definitely in a different part of my journey, just something just completely different, and then the experiences obviously that followed after then is what really made me become cognizant of my refugee background, which I'm happy to speak to as well, of course.
Yeah. I feel like just being someone that gets a lot of interviews and we see you in a lot of forms of media, how did you kind of like build that confidence to like just appear in interviews and like speak just in front of a lot of people and present speeches? So like how did you kind of like build to that place where you feel comfortable to like kind of talk about controversial like topics?
To be honest, I don't know if I can fully say I've built 100% confidence or feel comfortable in doing it. I think it's uncomfortable. It's inherently an uncomfortable conversation and a difficult one to have because, you get a lot of trolls when you do it. And a lot of people that just drop you nasty comments and horrible messages. But I think for me, I guess I've always had a sense of social justice instilled in me. I have always been somebody who has been passionate about speaking out about injustice or anything that I see. And I think, it's not so much in terms of, for me, the confidence of being able to speak out in the face of injustice. I think that's something that I've always had. But I think doing it in a public platform is quite different. That in itself presents its own unique set of challenges. And I guess having access to those platforms is another thing, and that's something that I'm really happy to talk about. But I felt like I've had really good support systems and structures around me. I've always been passionate about making a difference. I guess growing up, I never really did good at school. My teachers told me university wasn't for me, which is why I eventually dropped out of high school and was committed to proving them wrong later on in life. But I think I obviously definitely didn't have that confidence going into it. But what really drives me to continue, I guess, the work that I do is the messages of outpouring of support that I've received from members of my own community who tell me that my words spoke to them or what I had said meant so much to them. And I think that's really what gives me that confidence to continue and to keep going despite the adversity of it all. Because I get asked by a lot of young kids who say, how do I do this? I really want to get into this. And it's not something I would encourage for everyone to do.
Yeah, I think because like what makes you kind of stand out is the things that you are not willing to compromise. And I think that's kind of puts you in a position, for me, I think it puts you in a position where you're kind of targeted. And do you feel often you're kind of like that one Black person that speaks for everyone or like is expected to speak for everyone? Do you think that platform should be kind of like shared?
I think that's a really interesting and good question. I think, for me, I obviously found myself in this situation, I guess accidentally. I guess I became the voice and the face of a community that has fought for so long just to be heard. And different communities that I represent, I guess not only am I a former refugee, I'm also Muslim, I'm Black, I represent so many things. And I think it's important to acknowledge that intersectionality in terms of everything that I do. I think the media generally didn't really get to know us. And I don't think they've still gotten to know us. I think what's happened is, as a result of, tragic things that have happened, it was really, I found myself in that position. I think speaking for all communities, there's something that I would never claim to say that I do. And I think it's a scary thing that I have to balance all the time, completely. And recognizing that there's diversity within the diversity of my community. Just even when we talk about the former refugee community, are you kidding me? There's so many ethnicities, there's so many intergenerational factors that influence that. There's just so many, it's a world of its own, let alone Muslims, that is another world of its own. And that has its own politics, okay, in terms of who is represented, who is seen, and who is on these platforms and stuff like that. So I like to consider myself as somebody who likes to have those difficult but necessary uncomfortable conversations, because that's what we need to do. I'm sorry, but if I'm afforded with a platform, I'm not going to go there and say kumbaya, what everybody wants to hear, but not really the truth that everybody really needs to hear. And I think that's been a key tenet of my work and the way I approach these things. So I would love to see a situation and in a place where media diversifies and that voices are heard. And I think because of the platform that I had been given, a key motivation for me in terms of why I did the Third Culture Mind series with TVNZ was just because of that same reason. Recognizing that there's others in my community whose stories need to be heard, whose stories need to be seen by everyday New Zealanders. For me, I wanted to use the platform that I was given, that I was provided, to be able to raise the voices of others in my community, to bring them up. And that was a beautiful and empowering journey. Because of that TV series, I had my own, members of my community. My director was from refugee background. My producer was of refugee background. She was Christian. The director is Muslim. We've got a really diverse range of team that really, and this was, I guess a series that was made by us, for us. And I guess recognizing that gap and the pedestal that I have been put on, that's how I have gone on a journey to be able to bring others on with me. So no, I don't think it's right for just one person to be speaking out on just one community. I think New Zealanders need to hear from all of us, and it's important that we're provided a platform to be able to be seen and heard as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what I see from your shows. Like when I looked at the titles of some, it's like very specific, the fact that it's one of the series was about how Black people face like kind of racial issues here, because like we're all are refugees, but we all are kind of like have different privileges and different kind of experiences. And I think just the fact that you put out a series that's specific, that speaks to just Black people, like myself, I think that kind of like breaks the barriers in terms of like, yeah, we need to be specific about what we're talking about. We can't
Absolutely.
speak for all refugees. All refugees face the same kind of oppression. We're all different. So I think we kind of stepping into that direction of being like, okay, Black people need to have their own kind of platform place to speak about their experiences. So yeah, I think that's where I took from the series, and yeah.
Thank you. That's a beautiful message. I think, when I finished episode 3 and I looked at the refugee perspective in episode 1, I looked at the Muslim perspective. These are my intersectional identities, right? But that only represents a tiny snapshot of the stories, the experiences, and the culture of third culture kids, right? Refugee and migrant kids who've grown up in this country, who are New Zealanders. And I think all of those stories need to be told. And I think that was also for me an important message that I wanted to stress, is that I was hoping that this could be the beginning of more of those conversations. And what's really important is what you guys are doing here with the Voices of Aroha, and providing a platform for others to be heard. In my, I do a lot of interviews, and I think, obviously just speaking to you guys right now and the way you're conducting this interview in itself speaks for, I guess, the
Yeah.
differences.
I was gonna say, I know you do a lot of interviews, but this is a safe space,
It's definitely a
Like,
safe space. I like it.
yeah,
Guled,
I'll pass
you
it on.
basically you answered the questions before we even had to say them. You've obviously had a lot of experience doing this, and as you said yourself, there's a lot of intersectionalities within your identity, and obviously that comes with almost like 3 times more of the discrimination that a normal person would face. And it's really difficult when you're there's obviously this lack of representation in media and in this country in general. And so when you're trying to represent your community, there's, as you said, there's obviously you can never actually truly be representative of everyone, because within that diversity there's more diversity. So what has your experience been in terms of the feedback, or just maybe commentary here and there of people saying that you are not representative of them, or I think you know what I mean. So.
Oh yeah, look, I think there's so many things that I have to balance out for someone in my capacity. I want to be able to obviously look at the perspectives of others in my community, and I try to incorporate all of those different perspectives as much as possible. But I think that's inherently what comes with the territory in which I operate in, is that there's always going to be those perspectives. And particularly as a young person too, it's really hard sometimes because our community structures are not really designed in a way to support us young people. Growing up, I don't think I've had that support from my elders. And it's really important to bring them along this journey, because it's bigger than us, it's bigger than me. This is about our future generation that is coming up, and they need to be invested in that, and they need to be involved in that. So I've come up against a lot of that in terms of people, I guess, various voices or perspectives within, I guess, elements that may want to disassociate part of what I'm saying or anything like that. And look, I accept that. That's cool. I don't speak for everyone, and I don't claim to speak for everyone. And that's fine. I think everyone's entitled to have an opinion, a perspective, and that's the beauty of it. It's unfortunate that I'm labeled as this, I guess, this person that speaks out for everyone. And I think there's a danger in that sort of thing, because it's also a lot of pressure to carry. It's a lot of burden. I think, because it's heavy, man. It's heavy. You're just like, man, I really don't want to, disappoint anyone.
Yeah, because I
or
think at the
find
end of the
myself as more drama.
day, all you can do is be true to yourself and your own experiences and represent that. I think even us on here, obviously there's a lot of us from different identities, but we keep trying to reiterate that what we represent is ourselves and our own experiences. And the only thing that this shows, when you have that kind of backlash of, people thinking you're still not representative of everybody, is just the problem of the lack of representation. The fact that, you have this one person who you need to represent every single community, every single injustice. That's a problem.
It's a problem because there's only so much that one person can do. There's only so much that I am willing to extend myself. These sorts of things, it's not easy to do that too. In a way, I wish I could share the burden. And I know that there's people like you and Beth and Louise that are coming up now who allow us to be in a position to do that. But I think you're right. Inherently, the problem comes down to a lack of representation. The fact that there aren't other people who look like us, who speak like us, that are, and I think it's important to be able to talk about that. it's important to be able to address that, and so forth. Yeah, definitely. And look, we need representation everywhere, man. And it can be tokenistic representation. It needs to be meaningful representation. We're still asking for representation. That's the crazy
Yeah.
thing.
And there
Yeah,
may be some people as well that can maybe say when they see you kind of like being everywhere and being on the news and being in interviews, they may say like, why don't he bring like other people up with him, or why doesn't he bring some women, like Black women or Muslim women? What do you say to those people? Like, what is kind of the
That's a
reality
valid
of
point. That's a valid point. That's a valid point, 110%. And it's a responsibility that's placed upon me to be able to do that. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with my series. We only had obviously 2 women that featured in it, and we had like, I think 5, 6 guys. So obviously, it's not 100% of a perfect balance there, but we've commissioned some articles, and we've got some 3 powerful women that are writing for us right now. And it's not free labor. Like, we're paying them to be able to do that work. And it's really, I can't wait for those articles to come out so that we can share with the world as well. But that's what I say to that. That's how I really feel about it, to be honest. It's that's a valid point, and we should be, for those of us that are in privileged positions, to be able to bring our voices in our communities up, particularly those that come from marginalized voices. And women are definitely in that category. I think Black women are definitely in that category. I think Muslim women are definitely in that category. There's a lot of voices, young people in that category. There's a lot of different perspectives within our community that needs to be heard, because it's always the old
yeah,
uncles
it
out
should
there.
definitely not be built like a hierarchy. That's what I'd say.
No, for sure, babe,
Then
for
just put
sure. I'm
people
so
up
conscious
here like
about it. It messes
yourself.
with my mind.
Yeah.
But I think Louise was about to say something, my brother.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yes.
yeah. I was about to say, just going back to your high school period, and I just want to know what was it like for you, because you said like you dropped out from the school, you didn't have the support that you have, and now New Zealand is going to double the quota, more migrant kids are coming to schools, and it's always the story that the teachers don't believe in the kids just because they don't have the language, because the parents are not from here. So what is needed to address this problem, and what would you experience like?
Yeah, so for us, we came in the 90s. Before the 90s, there really wasn't, I suppose, a significant Black African community in this country. So that's one thing to acknowledge. That was really unique about my experience and compared to other former refugees, I suppose. So there was a big number of us, and in many ways, Louise, we were the first in our generation to kind of go through that resettlement experience, if that makes sense. So in many ways, growing up, I felt like I was the guinea pig in terms of, teachers really not knowing how to deal with us, really not knowing how to be able to effectively support us. And clearly that's had a big impact on my educational experience, and the path that I've chosen to carve out for myself. And that's something that I've definitely been conscious about. And I think what's really interesting is that um, there's still, I hear those stories in terms of the younger generation that are growing up, in terms of them having their peers not really believing them or value the perspectives that they bring, or not really realizing the potential that our former refugees have. And former refugees are talented. They bring so much skill sets. They bring so much contributions that they have to offer. And I really do think that that is something that can be done. We can do a lot more to be able to support former refugee youth in that sense. But partly that comes down to, I guess, the misconceptions and the stereotypes that exist about former refugees. The idea is that they aren't necessarily so effective and composed, and or really have a good grasp of, I guess, um, education. And those are all incorrect. And I think, yes, we may have gone through journeys within our processes where, I suppose, we have had to, I miss out on school, or You know, I didn't go to kindergarten, but obviously education proves that early stages of development of a child is so important, right? And we may miss out on those opportunities as a result of our refugee experience. But that doesn't mean to say that we don't have a lot of potential and we can help unlock it. I'm really passionate about that stuff, and I hope by sharing my story and my experiences, that it helps to, in a way, contribute towards better outcomes for, I guess, young kids of refugee backgrounds that are growing up in this country, that are going through the New Zealand education system, because it's hard. It's so hard, man. And like, our parents don't understand because they haven't really been through it.
Yeah, that's a thing. I think we have to do it all on our own. We haven't got the privilege of having, you know, a whole generation of support who have lived here before and who know the language and know the culture. We had to adapt on our own and then go into these schools trying to figure it all out on our own too. And it's not only difficult with teachers not understanding the experience and being a bit more lenient or just trying to help you figure it out, but then there's also the experience with kids. I know, for example, Beth and I at our college, we had this like experience of being called reverse racists. Those people, but when we call out racism, we get called reverse racist because people just refuse to accept the idea or to understand your point of view before trying to, you know, enter the oppression Olympics and make it about themselves as well. And it's very difficult because we also go up to teachers and say, hey, this is how I need to be supported. And they still are unable to give you what you need. And that kind of, I think you grow up feeling always made to feel inferior in the spaces that you enter. And so I kind of wanted to ask you about, like, because you're obviously, you said you're a policy advisor and it's obviously a very white dominated area. So what is your experience going to that kind of sector where you're probably one of few colored men, let alone a black man? And what is your experience with sharing your ideas and just being in that place in general?
Yeah, look, the spaces in which I operate in professionally, you know, like, I'm really proud of my current team. I think we've got a really strong, diverse team, you know, but that isn't necessarily reflective of every other spaces that I've worked in. And yeah, you're right. Policy generally is a very white area, and we're not represented. Hence why sometimes policies don't necessarily work for our people, because we're not around the table that informs the thinking, you know, that goes behind policy proposals, which is part of the problem. And again, it comes back to the root cause of representation, which we were just speaking about. So it hasn't been easy. I don't think it's easy for us to be able to navigate around those spaces. It comes with its own set of challenges. I'm grateful for the support that I do have, and have had, from, I guess, certain elements of, you know, throughout my career. And I'm really, really, really proud about that. But at the same time, the truth of the reality is that, we need to have more people in those professions. We need to have refugees in those particular roles as well. I'm hopeful that, you know, hopefully little kids that are growing up can, you know, come up and, like, basically, you know, see us and say, I want to be like that person, when I grow up, you know, and so forth. So that's really important. That hopefully it can be a role model and a positive message for them.
Guled, you were at the forefront trying to tackle the discriminatory refugee policy. What was your experience with that and what brought that on?
I think it's something that came to the forefront, obviously, after the March 15th terror attack. The truth of the reality is that policy, isn't a top secret thing. It's something that's always existed. And it was really unfortunate that this is something that was happening behind the scenes for years and years and years. Yet it was not talked about. Yet nobody really wanted to hear it, because it didn't fit in with the picture of how we like to portray ourselves as a country. And I think for me, after what happened in Christchurch, and I guess, you know, people deal with grief in their own little way. And I think for me, part of that process, obviously, and is part of the whole grieving process, is anger and frustration, and just, I guess, wanting to really call out people's double standards and hypocrisy. I mean, New Zealand came out in the droves with their flowers and with their "They Are Us" messages, and which in itself was a little bit problematic, but we'll get back to that another time. And I just, I guess I just wanted to be like, hey, hello, you came out 2 weeks ago with your flowers. Where are you now when we are faced with a discriminatory policy that inherently is built on the assumption that people from Muslim or African countries are terrorists? So I couldn't stand for that. I couldn't stand to be in a country where that was still the case, that we were denying other people who look like me, who speak like me, who come from similar backgrounds, the opportunity to thrive, to become contributing members of society, just like I have, and just like so many other people in my community have. So it was more of a desire to, I guess, bring that out to the forefront. And also, I felt a sense of a responsibility as a result of the platform that I was provided to be able to serve my community right. And for me, that meant calling out that policy. So I went through great lengths on that. It was obviously a very public facing campaign. And, the thing about New Zealand is that we don't like to talk about racism. We don't like to talk about it here. But as soon as the press is talking about it and it goes international, that's when we get concerned, because that doesn't fit in with our clean, green, socially progressive image. And ultimately, that's what led to the policy change. So I was committed to doing whatever it took to get rid of it. And I'm really proud of that campaign.
Yeah, I
In
think
terms of,
like one thought. Well, who's talking?
oh, sorry. In terms of your work in the international space, like what was your experience in the World Refugee Forum last year, and the representation that is needed from from refugees to go there and speak up and say, this is what we need. This is the sort of policy that works for us. Not these guys from this NGO saying this may work for you. Maybe you try this, but it's actually they never consult our communities, and I just want to hear those experiences.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting experience. I was grateful that the United Nations Refugee Agency had me on. I really liked the team over there, and I think the work that they do is incredibly important. And I was able to support them in that regard. And I felt really proud of that work. It was interesting because I guess again I had a sense of responsibility to be able to advocate on the experiences of refugees. I think refugee representation is a thing that has been raised again and again and again. It's an issue of concern that comes up all the time, and rightfully so. And I know that the United Nations High Commission for Refugees has gone through great lengths to be able to ensure that refugee voices are meaningfully listened to and acknowledged and heard and valued. So for me, those I guess those processes have further amplified the work that I do in being able to raise awareness about refugee causes in bringing it to the global stage. That's not something I was shy about. So again, I wasn't shy about having those difficult conversations even on a global stage like that. And the UN definitely welcomed that. I think they operate in a different way. Their contribution is, obviously is immense, and that's important, and it needs to be acknowledged. But also, I think, I just felt I felt like a sense of responsibility to definitely do everyone justice, I guess, when I was afforded with those platforms. And it was incredibly cool to meet Grover. I don't think it gets higher than that.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we kind of focus on educating our community and like the youth and like just people and students at
Mm,
school
mm,
about what the policies, what
mm,
policies, even what refugee agencies, refugee organizations are working on,
mm,
because people really have no clue. And so if
mm,
we don't know what the policy, what kind of policies are being made, how can we hold the government accountable? How can we hold anyone accountable?
mm.
We just find out about it through like I don't know, the media or whatever. So I think there needs to be a focus on just like educating the youth on the policies that exist, and kind of having a say as well. So how do you think that can be kind of like done, like having, maybe, I don't know, some kind of workshops at school or whatever.
Yeah. Look, I bet you alluded to an incredibly important gap. So I think you're right. That's something that needs to be addressed. And perhaps I think one way of doing that is by getting people like yourself, not just Louise, involved and having conversations about that and discussing the next steps in terms of how we can help to make that better, to improve that process, to inform others in our community around the machineries of government and how the system works and operates so that we can exert the most influence possible,
Yeah, I
the
think,
most
yeah,
possible influence.
we can do that. And I think but there's power in people that have a bigger influence, like the people that are involved with policy making. So we need to
That,
get those people also involved as well. We can only do so much. We have our own responsibilities in life, but
th-
that needs to be an actual, official thing.
that's right, Beth. So I'll wait on you to hear from the next steps on that because I will happily support you on that, my sister.
Oh yeah, that's it. Okay. But yeah, no, that's yeah. I also want to talk about, you kind of focus on like youth well-being, mental health and well-being.
Mm.
Um and kind of like how do you think that kind of like you being in the forefront, kind of speaking for, seems like for everyone, how does it kind of affect you like mentally, like your mental health?
You cracked me up when you said it seems like everyone. Sorry, that was a serious question. I was not supposed to respond like that. But Beth, I guess my answer to that is that mental health and well-being is important. We need to be able to start having conversations about this, to start talking about it, to start having discussions. I think all of that is necessary, and it's upon people like me and you and Nurjis and Luis to start this conversation. This is why we created Third Culture Minds, so that we can be in a position to inspire other young people to recognize that, look, it's okay to talk about mental health, that it's all right to normalize these conversations and to seek help when you need it, because we all go through these experiences and we need to be there for one another.
I know this episode is going to be obviously coming on later in the week, but I think this topic remains very valid for us to speak on. Obviously, we've seen over the past week what's been happening in America and in the protests coming to New Zealand over the death of George Floyd and just overall police brutality and racism that has been in many systems and institutions for way too long now. I've seen obviously people over the world, for example, even when they see the protests that happened in Auckland, which was incredible, they think it's only for America. They don't realize that we are also protesting injustices happening here against Black people, brown people, Indigenous people. So are there any thoughts that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I think what's happening in terms of America and institutional racism that's happening there is also connected to that of what is happening here in Aotearoa. We need to be able to have a conversation of that. Yes, our solidarity is with African Americans that are on the front lines that are getting murdered, who are being choked and not breathing. But at the same time, with that being said, we've got our own very set of own issues here. And that's something I've talked about. It's an area that I've researched in, an area that I've written about, and we need to talk about it. We need to address it. And dancing around it is not the solution. So we need to be able to tackle it head on. And like I said, to have those difficult, unnecessary, but courageous conversations.
It's very interesting. I think just seeing the double standard in the world, when you see a protest like this happen in the Middle East, you have all eyes on that city. You have all international agencies and leaders looking in and saying, hey, we're watching you. Do not attack the protesters. Do not treat them this way. And yet you have a country which is supposed to be the one who is the essence of democracy, spraying their people toppling their own police cars, hurting them, putting their knees on them and suffocating them. And there's literal videos out there for us seeing the way that they are treating them, and there is still, I'm not seeing any leader saying, hey, America, back off. Hey, Trump, you know, and people think this starts and ends with Trump. They do not realize that this has been in the system for so long. This also existed under Obama. He didn't
Our
do
leaders are
anything
not
for
going to do.
Ferguson.
Our leaders will not do anything until we start putting the pressure on. So now that coronavirus is over, I expect to see 1 million people out in the streets this Sunday.
Good. World Refugee Day. It's not something to celebrate, but something to think about, because as you said, like only 1% of the refugee population in the world is being resettled, and others are still stuck in camps, are still stuck in different areas. So what could you tell to the audience, to people that are listening to you, about the World Refugee Day?
Look, World Refugee Day is an incredibly important occasion, and people mark it in different ways. Right now, we have a fundraiser that's happening. On this World Refugee Day, we're aiming to raise $10,000 for the UNHCR COVID appeal. Hopefully, we will link this campaign to you guys so you can include it in your post and people are able to donate. But essentially, that's what we're about, and we're trying to raise awareness about, you know, the plight of refugees. We just eliminated COVID-19, so we need to start having conversations about how we resettle refugees in a safe way, so that they are provided an opportunity to thrive, to contribute, just like every single one of us on this post and this chat right now. So yeah, World Refugee Day is an important day, to a month actually, to highlight awareness. And this year I'm doing it through several ways. I am International Ambassador for Australian Refugee Week. In addition to fundraising, I've got some exciting news coming out actually on World Refugee Day, you know, which I've been told I'm not allowed to talk about now. But
Is it a book?
It's something. It's something.
We'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah. No, I'm excited, and I can't wait to share it as well with everyone. But look, it's important to talk about World Refugee Day. It's important to have conversations like this. And I hope that people that are listening or watching this are able to understand the importance of really empathizing with the refugee situation and being able to contribute meaningfully and so forth. So I hope many New Zealanders join us in on that journey. And on World Refugee Day, I want to acknowledge people like you, Narjas, Beth, and Louise, that are helping to change the narrative about refugees. And Kodrin, of course, who couldn't also be here. Those are the most important individuals. And I hope this World Refugee Day, we can also recognize you guys and the contributions that you bring, not just to educating us and New Zealanders, but to just generally to New Zealand society.
Thank you so much, Guled. I just need to say, I love how you're actually saying the R in my name. Can we start actually pronouncing people's names properly? Because it feels really good.
Honestly, no, thank you. I'm really glad to hear that, because my good friend Muhammad Hassan did a poem in school.
I saw that. I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm glad I did that, because I think I've definitely found myself in situations where my name has been butchered and not pronounced the right way, but also that I've butchered other people's names, and it's not a nice feeling to have.
Yeah. Luis, what's the recording time?
We got 1 minute just to say goodbye.
Okay. Thank you everyone for listening, and thank you Guled for sharing everything with us. We've definitely enjoyed every bit of this conversation, and we've highlighted some very important topics surrounding World Refugee Day. Is there anything else anybody else would like to share before we close this off?
Yeah, just want to recognize, since this interview is about World Refugee Day, I just want to recognize those, refugees that have courage to kind of like leave everything behind and just, come to the unknown in search of a better life. And we just want to say we see you and thank you, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be in a safer place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to thank all of you guys and the work that you're doing. Big fan of Voices of Aroha. So look forward to seeing what every single one of you guys achieves, inshallah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yoda.
do you want to...
Shirata khomoro ma brindane Parata khomoro ma hoy dalale Gishirata khomoro ma brindane Udalle dalle dalale hoy dalale Dalle dalle dalale brindane Dalle dalle dalale hoy dalale Dalle dalle dalale brindane
تنق تانيكي هنر تنق تانيكي دسكو تنق تانيكي هنر تنق تانيكي بدر ديلا قيمي كرمي خقدبر ماميكي بدر ديلا قيمي كرمي خقدبر ماميكي شواني مسد باوانم هاور دوبردي شواني مسد عزيزم هاور دوبردي تركي دلداري نازنين توبا من كردي تركي دلداري باوانم توبا من كردي اي دسكو تنق تانيكي هنر تنق تانيكي دسكو تنق تانيكي هنر تنق تانيكي بدر ديلا قيمي كرمي خقلبر ماميكي بدر ديلا قيمي كرمي خقلبر ماميكي تجاوب بياني يارم من دالو دلي مشكيني أقشى من دالو دلي مشكيني ورا جاني من رجاني من رياشي من ري مالكم بيرو شاري من رياري من رياشي من ري ديدكم عيقولي من ما شوشن دجوانا باه لا بارو شوانا عيقولي من ما شوشن دجوانا باه لا بارو شوانا عيبين بيان يان بين بيان تجاوب بيان يارم من دايالو دلي مشكين اشت من دايالو دلي مشكين تنق تانيكي هنر تنق تانيكي دسكو تنق تانيكي هنر تنق تانيكي بدر ديلا قيمي كرمي خقدبر ماميكي بدر ديلا قيمي كرمي خقدبر ماميكي روجنا بينم باوانم كارم بريانا روجنا بينم عزيزم كارم بريانا وقت عزيز مردم باوانم جينم زندانا وقت عزيز مردم باوانم جينم زندانا دسكو تنق تانيكي هنر تنق تانيكي دسكو تنق تانيكي هنر تنق تانيكي بدر ديلا قيمي كرمي خقلبر ماميكي بدر ديلا قيمي كرمي خقلبر ماميكي انت معلم واحنا منك نتعلم انت معلم واحنا منك نتعلم نسكت وانت موجود ما نرضى نتكلم نسكت وانت موجود ما نرضى نتكلم انت معلم واحنا منك نتعلم انت معلم واحنا منك نتعلم نسكت وانت موجود ما نرضى نتكلم نسكت وانت موجود ما نرضى نتكلم واللي خلاك ما يفهم يجي له يوم ويندم واللي خلاك ما يفهم يجي له يوم ويندم وما تسمع اللي يخدعك انت معلم وما تسمع اللي يخدعك انت معلم هي انت معلم واحنا منك نتعلم معلم انت معلم واحنا منك نتعلم نسكت وانت موجود ما نرضى نتكلم نسكت وانت موجود ما نرضى نتكلم معلم مضرب الإشارة تعرف نبض الحرارة مضرب الإشارة تعرف نبض الحرارة انت في الحب عبارة تخلي العقل حيارة
انت عبارة تخلي العقل حيارة واللي خلاك ما يفهم يجي يوم دابا يندم خلاك ما يفهم يجي له يوم ويندم او ما تسمع اللي يخدعك انت معلم او ما تسمع اللي يخدعك انت معلم انت معلم واحنا منك نتعلم والله انت معلم واحنا منك نتعلم نسكت وانت موجود ما نرضى نتكلم نسكت وانت موجود ما نرضى نتكلم I want you to all say it with me تستاهل طيارة لا طيارة شوية عليك تستاهل طيارة لا طيارة شوية عليك تطير انت في العالي ما نوصل لك يا غالي تطير انت في العالي ما نوصل لك يا غالي واللي خلاك ما يفهم يجي يوم دابا يندم واللي خلاك ما يفهم يجي له يوم ويندم وما تسمع اللي يخدعك انت معلم لا تسمع اللي يخدعك انت معلم والله يتمعلم